Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome back to another episode of Rewired to Inspire. This show where we'll dive into self-love, learn tangible ways to rewire the brain, and discovering your soul's purpose. The goal of Rewired to Inspire is to encourage listeners to begin doing the hard work, to get curious and open to maximizing your life. Our mindset shapes how we live. Depending on life events, traumas, and personal experiences, our mindsets are all vastly different. However, one thing we all have in common is the ability to rewire our mind, to change the narrative, and to pivot our lives. I hope you leave each episode with the belief that you are so worthy to live a life true to you. I look forward to chatting with you every single Tuesday and Thursday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am thrilled to be jumping on the mic with you all today for episode number 63 of Rewire to Inspire. And today we are going to be chatting about a subject that I could talk about all day. And today we are going to be diving into some self-love talk, why self-love is so important, and really just kind of having a conversation around self-love in general and just going over that loving yourself is not selfish. And I tuned into a monthly meetup last night with Next Level University all about why putting yourself first is so important. And there was just more things in that monthly meetup that just stirred up my mind of just recognizing, I think we've come to a collective halt, I feel, where it seems like so many people that I'm talking to recently are just feeling really low, are feeling off, are feeling uninspired, are feeling stuck, are feeling sad, are feeling depressed, are getting sick, are this, that, and the other thing. And I just can't help but think that it's because we've lost touch with our identity, meaning we've kind of lost touch with who we are at the core. And as I was kind of sitting with this for the last couple of days, a couple things came up for me personally of why this might be happening, but also collectively. And one thing that really kept jumping up for me is during the pandemic, when we were forced to stay home and we were forced to isolate, I think for a while it was really enjoyable, and to a point that a lot of us kind of repivoted our lives and we found new hobbies, we found new things, we grew, we evolved. But I think that through that process, a lot of us began to feel really disconnected from self, really disconnected from others, really disconnected from the world. And when we feel disconnected and we just feel numb and we feel confused, it can be really, really hard to give ourselves that self-compassion and to check in with ourselves if we don't even feel like we have that connection. And the thing about that is that trickles into our identity. And our identity is basically our belief about self. And if we don't really have an identity that we're holding on to. And so basically by identity, I mean, I'm an athlete, I am an author, I am a business owner, I am a podcaster, I am a mom, like whatever your identity is, if you don't actually have an identity that you're holding on to, it's going to refrain you from taking action because you're not going to really feel like you have a purpose, which is then going to interfere with your confidence. And it therefore is going to trickle into our levels of self-love. And so when we feel this way and our sense of self is lost, it can be really, really easy for us to get stuck and really, really easy for us to get confused and low on ourselves and just out of touch with self. And so my goal of today's episode is to really just normalize this conversation that self-love is not selfish, and it's crucial that we take time for ourselves. And I think that especially as women, we feel this societal pressure that we need to get everything done and we need to put everybody else before us, and our work is our top priority. And if that's not done, it's a reflection of us and who we are. But I'm realizing recently that without having sense of self and any form of belief and compassion and ability to do things, we're really no good to anybody. And I think that until we cognitively learn to accept that pouring love into ourselves is not selfish, we will feel burnt out all the time. We will feel overworked, overwhelmed, exhausted. And I've noticed this with myself recently where my threshold of patience has been so minuscule. And I'm recognizing that that's so not like me. Like I normally have an abundance of just patience, an abundance of just being able to bite my tongue when I'm feeling a certain type of way, an abundance of taking time for myself. And I've realized that over the last couple of months, I've just been in such a go autopilot that even myself, I've forgotten to take time for myself. And I'm realizing that I'm not practicing what I'm preaching as much as I should be. And so a couple days ago, I decided to put my foot down and just rewire that for myself, because that's the thing. Like anything I share on my podcast is that we have the ability to stop and to change that. We have the ability to pivot that for ourselves. But in order to pivot something and to make change, we have to first bring awareness to it. And so that is my goal of today's episode, is to just bring awareness to it for you. Where are you at? Checking in with yourself. How is your level of self-love? How is your level of pouring into yourself? Do you feel like you're operating at a 1 or a 2 out of 10? Do you feel like you're just exhausted? Do you feel like you've been hitting a wall for a long time? And are you ready to just claim that power back, but maybe aren't sure how to do that? So that is my goal today's episode, is to hopefully leave you feeling resourceful, that you are deserving to pour into yourself in some ways in which you can do so. So I know I had just mentioned about the pandemic for a second, but I really wanted to take you guys back for a moment on why I'm so passionate about self-love and why I know that it's crucial. And I'm really passionate about it because I never really knew what the word self-love meant until a couple years ago. But I can definitely remember having extremely low self-esteem. Self-esteem was more what it was referred to when I was in school. But I can remember having low self-esteem really as far back as I can remember. And when I was roughly 12 years old, I remember I asked my mom if she could buy me foundation for the first time. And I remember the reason I asked is because I hated my freckles so much. And I had the internal belief that if I wore foundation, maybe people would think I was pretty. And maybe if I wore more makeup, maybe I would fit in and I would look like the people that I was seeing on TV, and I could just maybe start to fit in, even though I was only 12 years old. And I just kept thinking on that thought, and I was like, where does that come from? Like, where does our lack of empathy of self come from? And I really think it comes from nothing and everything. And what I mean by that is sometimes, yes, it can come from a specific event or a trauma or a person or whatever, but I think a lot of it comes from comparison. We compare ourselves to everybody and anything around us, right? I remember when I was younger, I always had curly hair and I would always want straight hair. And I had freckles, and my friends that didn't have freckles would say that they wanted freckles, and my friends with straight hair would say they want curly hair. And I just remember from such a young age recognizing that we all want what we don't have. And we can spend our whole lives stuck in that trap of comparison. And I think that comparison is a really tricky game, because it's good to compare ourselves in some ways as far as like work ethic and goals and whatever of where we aspire to be. But recognizing that we can never completely follow in somebody else's footsteps, nor are we supposed to, because that's not our path. But I just remember from such a young age, really having a negative relationship with myself. And I think that led into me feeling a certain type of way around other people, me being so stuck in my head that it would cause me to have internal anger, and then that anger would stick with me throughout the day. And it got to the point where getting dressed in the morning was like the most frustrating thing in the world, and I would have clothes everywhere because everything looked stupid and I just hated everything. And no matter how many times people would tell me I was beautiful or you look great, it almost made it worse because I didn't have that internal belief. It just felt really icky and it gave me anxiety. And I just remember living like that for so long. And there's definitely still times now where I'll be getting dressed and my partner will catch me and he'll say, Jessie, you're doing that thing again where you try on something and you say you look stupid and then you throw it on the ground and then you get angry and you try something else and you just get yourself in this tornado of negative emotions. And so I'm recognizing that I've dealt with this for so long and it's come in waves, and it's definitely a lot better, and it's gotten better through some of the channels and ways that I'm going to share with you guys today. But I just want you to know that if you feel that way, just know that as much as it's not okay, it is normal. It's normal to compare to other people. It's normal to have a negative view of self. It's normal to feel icky sometimes when people say things, especially if we don't have the belief. But what my goal is collectively, globally, is to normalize self-love and just validating that, sticking up for yourself, saying I'm beautiful and believing it is not selfish. And that's the thing, is I think that we've become so good at being negative that when we're positive, it almost like ricochets back at us in a negative way. Because let's say, for example, I'm operating at a really low frequency of feeling like I am just ugly, worthless, whatever. And somebody walks in the room and they are just glowing and they are confident and they're able to say, I am beautiful. You're either going to go two ways of resenting that person or aspiring to be like that person. There's really no in between. And I think that this is when it becomes tricky, because we start to view self-love and validation as ignorance. And so I think it's just this really cloudy gray area where it's like, what is that sweet spot? And I think that sweet spot is going to be unique to each person. And the thing is we'll never collectively all be on the same page, because I think we all have views of self differently for different reasons. And so what I mean by that is, for example, you might have really, really high self-belief, but you might have really, really low self-worth. So meaning you kind of believe in yourself, but you don't really take care of yourself, meaning you don't really care what foods you eat. You don't care if you don't go to the gym. You don't care if you don't hydrate yourself. You don't really take good hygiene practices, but you might have all the belief in the world that you're really, really good at your hobbies. So there's really a difference there. And my goal is to just normalize the conversation of being okay with saying that you're awesome, being okay with saying, I love myself, I am beautiful, I am strong, I am worthy, and actually believing that and it not being icky. And again, that takes time. It took me years and I'm still on that train. And I don't want you guys listening to think that I have this all figured out, because, oh my gosh, just this morning I looked in the mirror and I caught myself saying something negative and I had to catch myself and say, no, that's not helpful. That's not a helpful thing to tell to yourself. And so I really just want to go through a couple things that have helped me, because if I can even help one person find the belief internally that you're so worthy to tell yourself good things. And I think that that's my first point, is we're so good at telling everybody else good things. And I think that that is a great place to start. Like, think of the times you're out and about and you see someone and you just love their shoes, or you love their jacket or their sweater or whatever. And I've gotten better at like physically saying those things to those people. I'll go up and say, hey, I really, really like your shoes. Like, where did you get them? They're awesome. And just getting your mind in that headspace of practicing saying kind things. Because if we're struggling to tell ourselves good things, it can be really empowering to pour that into other people, but also not forgetting about yourself. But it can be a really, really great first step to start with doing that to other people. Begin to notice the good around you. If you're aspiring to look like a certain person, ask yourself what it is about them that you love. And are you able to communicate to them? Are you able to spread that positivity and that kindness? Because if we're having a hard time starting within, it might be a great first step for you to start externally, because maybe it's not safe, or it hasn't been safe to tell yourself those kind things. And again, I just want to highlight that this is a personal journey. This is something that nobody else around you has to know. This is something that is with you and you only. My relationship of self-love is so sacred to me that I literally do it in my head in the morning in the mirror. It's between me and myself, because that's all that matters in those instances. And because I'm able to do that and pour that love into myself, I'm then able to therefore radiate that positivity outwards. And so the first thing that I want you guys to do, which is one of the hardest things that we can do, but also probably it's going to be easy, but it's going to be hard, because bringing awareness to it is hard. But the first thing that we have to do is identify what our insecurities are. So for me, that was, I hated my freckles. I hated that I had curly hair, which in retrospect is interesting because now I love those two things about myself. But at a younger age, I literally used to rub raw lemon on my face to try to burn my freckles off my face, This is how bad my level of self-love has been in my life and just how toxic it has been. And so acknowledging your insecurities is the first step. Getting honest with yourself. What are the things you tell yourself that you feel icky about? What are the things that when you look in the mirror, you feel icky about? And then asking yourself, are these things that I can change and work towards? Or are these things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but really might just matter to you? So for example, I used to have this bump on my nose that I absolutely hated. And I went and got it removed a couple years ago. It was just a super easy thing to just remove from my face. And I just remember my whole life, I'm like, I want that gone. I want that gone. I want to do something about it. I don't love it. I don't love it about myself. And so is there little things like that that you have control of that you can get rid of? But if there's things that you literally can't change, how can you learn to love that about yourself? Because everybody around me wishes I didn't get rid of it because to them, that's what made Jessie, Jessie, right? And so often those things that we hate about ourselves are the things that other people look at in love. And so for example, I have a friend who has dimples and she absolutely hates her dimples. And I'm literally, anytime I see someone smiling and I see they have dimples, I compliment them on them because I think they're the cutest things in the whole wide world. Like, I think they're just so cute. But to someone who has them, they probably hate them. And so it's just always this comparison game. But if you can identify and get honest with yourself, your insecurities. And I think that, like I said, the things that you can change. So for example, if you're looking in the mirror and you're like, wow, I've really let myself go. I've put on some weight. How can I take action? Because the empowering thing about this is, let's say, for example, it's your hair that you hate. Maybe you go get your hair done to a style that you feel represents you. I just dyed my hair back to my natural hair color a couple weeks ago, and I'm feeling more like myself than ever. I was unhappy with my physique a couple months ago, and so I decided, okay, I haven't been putting in the discipline and putting in the work to eat properly and go to the gym, so I can't really sit here and complain about it. So that's often the ways that we can also increase our level of self-worth is by taking action with the things that we say that we want and how we're actually putting in momentum to get closer to that. So once you've identified your insecurities, ask yourself, am I doing everything I can to change said thing? Am I doing everything in my power to change that belief about myself? Because if it's about weight, for example, what are you doing to tackle that? If it's about your clothing, maybe your clothing no longer suits your identity and you're just over it. What are small little ways you can slowly maybe remove things out of your closet and get new things that make you feel good? So that's the first thing that I want you guys to do is sit down and write down all of your insecurities. It is a really powerful exercise to do. And what I like to do after I do that is literally rip it up. Get rid of it, because you'll know those things in your heart and in your head. But I find ripping it up and physically getting rid of it is so empowering because you're just like, I'm the one that gets to say these things about myself. I'm the only one that is able to change these things about myself. I am the one in control and in power of this. And that is an empowering thing to say. The second thing that I encourage you guys to do is to accept that perfection doesn't exist and to accept your flaws. And so I think that the rise in self-esteem issues and self-love gaps and insecurities is because we see things on social media with all these filters and edits and just all these things, and we compare ourselves to things that don't even exist. We compare ourselves to a computer's perfectionism and think that that's what we're supposed to look like. It is so refreshing when I see these videos on TikTok and on Instagram of women and whoever just taking off their makeup, being their organic self, because I'm like, that's what we're supposed to look like. That is what I look like. That is what you look like. So why are we trying to pretend like we're these fake Barbie dolls when we're not that? It causes us so much internal conflict because we're comparing ourselves to something that doesn't even exist. And so just learning to accept that perfectionism does not exist. We all have flaws. We all have things that we hate about ourselves. Literally walk into any women's washroom. I see this a lot, like at bars and stuff. You'll walk into the women's washroom and a woman will just be saying something really, really terrible about herself. And then another woman will be like, what? Like, what are you saying? Like, you're gorgeous. And it's like, we're just so good at beating ourselves up and lowering our frequency, lowering our vibe without even realizing it. And it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, because we often think people care so deeply about what we look like, what we wear, what we do, when in reality, they don't, because they're too worried about their own things, right? You could be sitting there super insecure about something and I would never even notice that thing unless you point it out. And so just beginning to bring awareness, and I think we all know this in retrospect, but sometimes it's about just reminding ourselves that perfectionism doesn't exist. It does not exist. It will never exist. And flaws are what make you unique and what make you beautiful. Different is beautiful. Uniqueness is beautiful. And remember that, even though I know it can be really hard, especially with media and television and things that we see of tricking us into thinking we have to be a certain type of way, but just know that you don't, and that doesn't make you human, and that doesn't make you you. The third one is one that's not really about physical, but it really will raise your level of self-love, because self-love isn't just about your appearance. Self-love is also what's going on in your heart and internally and in your mind. And so discovering what's important to you. How can you begin to state the things that are important to you and then do them often? And so if you have something that you love to do and you haven't been doing it in a long time, it's also likely that your level of self-love and self-compassion is down, because your body is like, wow, why aren't we doing the things that we love? Like, what are we doing? And so what are those things that you love to do, and how can you do them more often? For me, recently, I stepped away from doing crafts for a couple months because I've just been so busy with a lot of other things in my life. And I realized as soon as I got back in my craft room and I started playing with resin and making jewelry again and designing things, I'm like, whoa, I feel like myself again. Because the things that we love to do are equally as much a part of our identity as our physical appearance and physical things in the world. And so how can you begin to discover, rediscover, and practice the things that are important to you? My fourth thing is to grow and invest time in areas that support what's important to you. So kind of going off discovering the things that you love to do, how can you learn to invest more time in doing those things? How can you find time every single day? Because we often hear self-care and self-love is taking a bubble bath and drinking a glass of wine. And it's like, yeah, that's great and that's fun every once in a while, but that doesn't make all my problems go away. I don't get out of the bath and I just magically love myself. We have to take action and do the things that we love to fill our cup to begin to feel that way. And so how can you begin to invest more time? And time, we always say we don't have time, but time could literally just mean 15 to 30 minutes a day. Maybe that means waking up earlier. Maybe that means going to bed a little bit later or earlier so you can wake up earlier. Maybe that means finding little gaps of time that you can spend less time on your phone. We all have time to do these things. We just make up excuses and do things that aren't actually essential to our life. And so sometimes it's about readapting the narrative of your life so you find time for these things, because without finding time for these things, you will burn to the ground. And that is what I've recognized in the last couple of weeks, is that I was not taking the time to do the things that I love. And so in return, I was feeling icky, I was feeling down, I was feeling sad, I was feeling frustrated, I was feeling lost, I had creative blocks, I just wasn't myself. And as soon as I took time to invest in myself and do the things I love, I noticed that very quickly I was beginning to get back on track. And a couple of last ones that I just want to share with you guys are some things that I've shared with you guys before. And these ones are more action-based items, but there's a couple things I want you to try to do. I want you to first, and I'm going to kind of do it in order of the first and then the second one. The first thing I want you to do is to practice more gratitude. And I said that a couple minutes ago about like telling people the things you love about them, because external things can sometimes make it easier and a great first step. But I encourage you to write down, and physically writing it down is so much more helpful, 3 things a day you're grateful for. It literally takes 30 seconds. Start your day like that and end your day like that. The more that we find things we're grateful for, the more our mind starts to find things that we're grateful for. But if we just get stuck in our head of, I'm ugly, I hate this about myself, I hate that about myself, our mind's just going to constantly tell us those things and reiterate those things to us. And so if we can interfere with that pathway, and again, rewiring our brain, that's what this whole podcast show is about, is rewiring our brain. our mind is then able to look for the good. It's able to see the good, to accept our flaws without negativity, and to just realize that that is what makes us us. And so I know I've said that a couple times on my podcast, but I cannot stress enough the importance of gratitude. Gratitude will change your life. If we all just had a little bit more gratitude in our life, we would be living such a more happy, fulfilled life. And the second thing that I want you to do, and I'm a little hesitant to even say this one, but I'm saying it because I know that it works, but I know that it can also take time. And so I've shared this story on my podcast before about how when I was 17 years old, I asked my friend that I went to college with how she's so positive, like how is she so confident? Like she just always would say good things about herself, would always just be the light in the room. And one day I just asked her, like, how are you so positive? Like, what are you doing to be so confident? And she said, every morning I look in the mirror and I tell myself 3 good things about myself. And I've never forgotten that, and I will never forget that day, because I remember going home and trying it for a couple weeks, and it was like brutal. Like I couldn't think of one good thing to say about myself. But slowly over time, as I practiced and as I used bridge statements, it began to get a little bit easier. Because at first it was super overwhelming and I felt super icky and it was super weird. But as I used bridge statements, and so basically a bridge statement kind of takes out the straight, I guess, affirmation. So instead of saying I'm beautiful, which might feel really, really icky, you could say a bridge statement would sound something like, maybe I'm not as ugly as I think I am. So basically a bridge statement is just tweaking it a little bit so it's not so overwhelming, but it's also not a lie. Like, I'm so stupid. It's possible that I'm not as stupid as I think I am. It's just those little ways that we can tweak our brain to rewire itself to begin to see the good, because I know it can be overwhelming to just come out of the gate and say, I'm beautiful and I'm smart and I'm awesome and I'm this and I'm that. It can feel really comfortable, really icky, and really overwhelming. And so knowing that these things take time, they take practice, and that's okay. But I've literally added to my daily list to tell myself 3 nice things every single morning in the mirror. Because I know the mornings that I do that, my partner's literally said ever since I started doing that again, he can tell that I'm just more present, I'm more bubbly, I'm more myself, because I'm starting my day with telling myself something kind about myself instead of looking in the mirror and going, ugh, and just starting my day off negatively. So that is what I have for you guys today. I just really wanted to come on here and pour from my heart of why self-love is so important and why I'm so passionate about it, because I think that if we don't talk about it, it doesn't make it go away. And I really think that collectively it is getting worse, because again, I think we're losing touch with self and losing touch with the things that we love. And so beginning to find time to do those things, knowing that you're worthy and how important it is to take time to pour into yourself each and every day. It is not selfish. It is a part of life. We are only ever going to know ourselves, and we are only ever going to know this body. So how can we make sure we're taking care of it to the best of our capability and making sure that we're giving it everything that it needs? Because our body really does everything for us. And so how can we thank it in return through our actions? So I just want you guys to know you guys are amazing. You guys are so worthy. I'm so proud of you. I'm so thankful for you. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you take some time after this to go pour into yourself, to reflect on some things that are important to you, to get just brutally honest with yourself of where you're at, because knowing that bringing awareness to it and starting is the only thing and the best thing that we can do. So I'm so proud of you. Thank you guys so much for tuning into episode number 63, all about self-love. All the love, you guys. I look forward to chatting with you guys next episode. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at JessieBrown13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next episode. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.